Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. This is, of course, the Screen Watching Podcast, your favorite podcast dedicated to what you've been watching on the screens. And what I've been watching on the screens, what my friend here, Simon Foster's been watching on the screens. Simon Foster, you've been to the movies this week. You saw a sequel, a brand extension.
Yeah, look, hello, Daniel Barrett, Screen Watchers everywhere. It's been an interesting week at the movies. We're looking at Evil Dead Burn today, which is the next chapter in the Evil Dead saga. Did I like it or not? You're about to find out.
I mean, I've already seen your Letterboxd review.
Ah, yes, you do stalk me on Letterboxd a bit, don't you? You keep up with what I'm going to say about my movies by my Letterboxd treats. And I will be sending out my Screen Space newsletter very soon with a detailed review of this film in there. But, yeah, I don't know. I love the blood and guts, but there's stuff in there that I've got complaints about. What have you been watching?
You just spoiled it completely. Simon did not like this movie at all. I've been taking a bit of a trip back to the 1970s, but not really. I've also been watching a IP brand extension. I'm looking at the 2026 reboot of Little House on the Prairie. That's right, trad wives, get excited. We're going to be taking a look at what's been happening out. And you know what? Until this week, I couldn't actually define exactly what a prairie was. I mean, I kind of got a sense of the vibe of a prairie, but I didn't really know. If you said define for me a prairie, I could not have done that until I did a Google this week.
Dog. See, the word prairie for me always is followed by dog because of those cute little things that you see on the YouTube. That
you get prairie dogs, but that's not a prairie specifically. It's just like a large expanse which has grass, pretty much.
Could be out of our depth here, Dan.
Maybe this review really will suffer. Have you got anything else on your docket this week, Simon?
I'm going to have a look at just a very small film that's playing at the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival this week. It's called Eyes Like Diamond. Do you believe that the Tasmanian tiger still exists, Dan?
Very good question. I believe that it does. Wow. I know that it's an extinct creature.
Well, you might love this documentary.
Well, my thinking on this before we get into it is that I would assume that for an animal to be considered not extinct, there needs to be a certain number of them in the world. Okay, but I'm going to guess that maybe the Tasmanian tiger falls into this sort of nebulous thing where it's like TV ratings. If less than 5,000 people watch something, it receives a 0.
Okay. Yes, I can see your point being made, and there is a term for that level of extinction, or that level of existence, I should say, that is used in the documentary that I can't remember. But yes, you're right. There's got to be proof of life, and this documentary addresses that, but also something else, which I'll talk about very soon.
Yeah, proof of life. It sounds very much like we're just talking about this podcast. Look, there's a couple of other things I'm very briefly going to chat about. Sparks of Tomorrow is this really awesome little anime that's dropped on Netflix this week. People need to check that one out. And maybe something that people don't need to check out, but I'm going to talk about anyway. 5-Star Weekend. It's got Jennifer Garner, and it's right now streaming on your Peacock in the US and Binge here in Australia. But look, we can only chat about all of these things if we get started on the podcast.
This is not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher! Mother!
Secret lover. What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
Simon, if you'll indulge me, can we take a look at the Little House on the Prairie?
Yeah, let's do Little House on the Prairie first, and then we'll unleash the undead.
It's actually the same thing.
Okay, good.
These are very similar properties.
Let's play a clip.
Tell me, Mr. Ingalls, what brought you to this land?
A fresh start for my family.
This will be our new forever.
Simon, I don't know if you're really that familiar with Little House on the Prairie, but... Oh, sorry.
Yes, I am. It was of my my generation, my sort of early TV watching. This is where our 13-year age?
37 years.
37-year age different you and I have, that I am fully aware of Laura Ingalls and the Michael Landon-led Little House on the Prairie family. You not so much.
Yeah, you've been reading my newsletter. So look, this is something which... I came to this knowing about Little House on the Prairie. I had a pretty good sense as to what the show was. But when I was interrogating myself, I tend to waterboard myself a fair bit before I watch a lot of these TV programs. as I was interrogating sort of my history with it, I realized I don't think I've ever watched the program. It's one of these shows which, being here in Australia, sometimes there's shows which aired but don't really sort of fall into that constant sort of repeat structure. Like, Charlie's Angels, for example, in the 70s, a show which aired like in the 70s going into the 80s, never really got repeated much. And so I remember when the movies for that came out, I'd never actually watched the original show because it was so infrequently available here. Little House on the Prairie falls into being one of those kinds of programs. Ran for 9 years, from I think 72 through 82 originally. Certainly it made a pop cultural mark. But when I think about Michael Landon, when I think about Michael Landon, it's not this, it's Highway to Heaven. And I'm of an age where Highway to Heaven was finishing up in 89, so I've barely got a memory of that either. Like, it's... he's just one of these TV stars where I appreciate where he's come from, from Bonanza through. And Bonanza, again, another show that I've never really seen.
I always recall
that availability.
Michael Landon from I Was a Teenage Werewolf, one of his very early 1950s films. I love that movie. And when I say love, I'm fond of it.
So look, this brings me to Little House on the Prairie, which... I guess maybe I think people know what this is going to be about, which is you've got a family who... At least in this sort of version of it. And my understanding is that this is fairly closely aligned with the original books by, it's Laura Ingalls.
Laura Ingalls, yes.
Isn't it like a triple?
Laura Ingalls Finkelstein.
Wilder,
yes. That's
I think.
Right. Yep.
I think that might be right. But anyway, so I think it's very much in line with those original books, but what this one does is, because it's the modern moment, it takes a few extra steps along the way and maybe deals a little bit more with Native Americans living in the area as well.
So it contemporizes it as much as the original text will allow. It sort of brings it a little bit into the modern thinking.
It's a show that's a bit more in line with where the modern sort of moment is. So when you're watching this, it actually, the show will get accused of being like the woke version of Little House on the Prairie. Like, that's just kind of the way these narratives go. But when I think about what they're doing in this program, it feels a lot in the line of watching like a Taylor Sheridan version of Little House on the Prairie. Now, I know that you coming off the back of watching The Madison, which is pretty ghastly, you've probably got like a very specific idea as to what that is. And it's not quite that, it's not quite Taylor Sheridan-ish, but it sort of takes this thing of trying to tell very sort of traditional Midwestern values, not even Midwestern, like Western values, but through a bit of a more modern lens. So Taylor Sheridan will take moments to actually deal with the Native Americans of whichever sort of area his show is being set in. Like, that is a regular feature of that, and it kind of feels like they're taking a similar embrace here because it's 2026.
Do you think it exists because Sheridan is such a big TV name at the moment? Do you think that it can be sort of sold off the back of his influence over television?
Look, I don't think that many people are going to draw a Sheridan connection to this program, but
except you've
tapped on what I think is the interesting conversational point about this, which is, why is this show coming back now? And there's something very interesting happening culturally where we are seeing, like, off the back of almost a near decade, at least, Taylor Sheridan shows really sort of predominantly sort of Texas-based, but, suddenly does extend beyond Texas. You've got all those shows which are doing remarkably well. You've got a political climate right now where, people have never been more divided. It feels very much like that sort of late 60s going through to late 70s, US political era. It just kind of feels, there's definitely the echoes of that are being felt at the moment.
It's volatile.
Other things happening culturally at the moment is you're seeing a rise of country music as a very hip musical space at the moment. Okay, like, it just kind of feels like we're sort of going through the sort of 70s-ish era of culture sort of being revisited once more. And so suddenly we're seeing Little House on the Prairie. It just kind of feels like of a piece. And the cultural thing that I think most people are going to lean on, which is absolutely deserved from this program, is that there's a rise of the trad wife movement, which is this idea of, it's been embraced by sort of young people in a very sort of TikTok meme culture kind of a way, of these sort of values where the wife should be staying at home while the man's off and cooking, and the wife acts in a very sort of demure, like prim and proper sort of a way. And
I didn't know what trad meant. So you said that and I had never heard that term before.
Oh, well, you need to get out of your boomer Facebook pages, Simon, and, spend some time out in the real world.
Okay, so it's leaning into the traditional family structure. So it's very much speaking to. Oh, see, now this gets dangerously close to.
I don't know that I'd say that it's speaking to the moment, but I would say that the moment is speaking to why the show is back.
Interesting. That is interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Look,
All right.
and
Well,
so the show itself, it is kind of what it is. It's a very sort of, I wouldn't say, it's a traditional family drama about a family who are living off the land.
Which probably makes me question why the original was such a success at a time when culture and society was going through a similar volatile change. Do you think it was? And we could, probably read up on this and find out exactly the sort of culture and society that the original came into. But the fact that it sort of came at a time in the mid-70s when it was all about divorce and swinging and, the coastal, coastal cultures.
That's one version of that's like one take. But then you've got all these other people who are like, well, let's reject this instead. Let's try to find something a bit more sort of traditional.
That's my point. Yeah, exactly. That's what it's born of. So maybe the timing is exactly
It's worth noting that Little House on the Prairie originally came off the back of TV being very heavily dominated by Westerns. So really, this actually, Little House on the Prairie feels like it was of a lineage that was taking place sort of the time. Okay, so US TV, if you look at the schedules, like leading right up to the late 60s, it was dominated for at least a good sort of 10, 15 years from the earliest periods of TV by Westerns. That was the dominant TV culture.
Yeah.
Like you'd look at a schedule and it's pretty much just Westerns wall to wall with like a couple of sitcoms that have dropped in here and there.
We've spoken of this before. Yeah. There were dozens of shows that have long since disappeared into the ether that were top 10, top 20 shows. You're absolutely right.
And so Little House on the Prairie was like kind of the last gasp of that one. And so as I'm looking at this current moment, like we're looking at some of the biggest shows on TV, which are these Taylor Sheridan programs. And yes, if you look, when we're here in Australia looking at like the sort of, TV landscape from the last like 10 years or so, we're not necessarily looking at Taylor Sheridan's programs, but certainly in the US, they're massive and not every viewer's watching it. Certainly you look at the Emmy Awards and they don't nominate those programs at all. So it's one of these things where you have to look at the ratings and not necessarily where the, hip, as you said, the cultural sort of energy is around these programs.
Where do we see this new version of Little House on the Prairie? And who do they get to play because one of the great things about the original was the casting. All of them became like major magazine cover type of stars. Who's sort of picking up the slack this time around?
I'm not sure all of them did, but certainly like Melissa Gilbert and Michael Landon.
For sure, yeah. And Melody Anderson was in there for sure. And they were names. Ralph Waite as the granddad, they were all sort of major people back in the day. I remember this very clearly.
Everyone's still talking about them. Just reading up on the original program, I found it very interesting to look at some of the cast changes happening sort of throughout the run of that series. I hadn't realized that Jason Bateman was a regular on the show for a season, but I did know that Shannon Doherty was there right at the end as well. So
very young, absolutely.
There were a few names that broke out of it. So look, in the lead here, you've got an Australian actor, Luke Bracey, playing the father.
Mr. Bracey.
Yeah.
He's good.
So you've got him. The actress that I would suggest that you look to, because outside of Luke Bracey, who I barely just acknowledge exists because I don't think I've really seen him in anything before, there's not really a name cast. There's a young actress in it who plays like the young Laura, and her name's Alice Halsey. And I reckon she's definitely got a very sort of strong spark. When you just see a star on TV and you're like, yeah, this person, like, let's just keep an eye on them. Like, she's one of these actors. Like, she's, I don't know, I'm going to guess maybe like 10 years old or something. Like, she's a young girl, but like, she's definitely got something about her.
Nice. All right, where do we watch this show?
Netflix.com, Simon.
I know of it. All right, let's put all this sweetness behind us and get deep into the realm of the possessed undead with Evil Dead Burn.
All right, you ready?
Thank you, Joseph. That was beautiful.
No. That's Will's seat. Where's the wedding ring?
Alice, you were his wife. Why aren't you wearing it? I'm not sure.
Did you sell it?
No, of course not.
You get a good price.
I really think we should do this another time.
No, now's the best time.
Will's looking down on us from above.
A memorable, significant moment for me in movie going. I was just a high schooler when I saw at a slumber party the original Evil Dead on a VHS rental tape that was so scratchy and overplayed that you could barely make out what was on the screen. But I remember having the time of my life watching it. The sequel, Evil Dead 2, was a cinematic journey for me at a time when I was just soaking up everything to do with cinema, and I loved it, and I still love number 2. And then you had Army of Darkness number 3, which is just a hoot and solidified what a legend Bruce Campbell is and what an inventive filmmaker Sam Raimi is at the time. Even the 2013, I guess, remake, the one that Fede Alvarez did, it lent into the blood and guts and gore with a full-on R rating that was just an absolute blast to watch. The great thing about all these films is they're not really about anything. They don't need to have any kind of message or subtext, or these are shows that just want to deliver the laughs, the gore, the good times to be had by over-the-top horror filmmaking. Lee Cronin tried to introduce a little bit of, deeper meaning in the Evil Dead Rise back in 2023, but he still lent very much into the inventively staged gore and the frights, and it was very much of the Evil Dead series to date. Now, with Evil Dead Burn, you've got a French filmmaker, Sebastian Vanacek, who's coming off a small but really well-liked film called Infested. This is his first big role of the franchise Dice, and he does a very admirable thing. He tries to invent some sort of backstory, some depth to his characters to give it some sort of modern context. In this one, he addresses the cyclical nature of domestic violence. This tells the story of a young woman whose young husband is a total dick, abusive both verbally and, as we learn, physically. We learn that her in-laws and the family that she has married into is suffering through the cyclical nature of domestic violence and dealing with a father-in-law who's very abusive, a younger brother to her husband who won't take responsibility or won't, speak up to protect the women in the family, a wife who, mother-in-law who turns the other cheek. So out of this violence comes the Evil Dead horror. Now, these are all obviously very worthy topics that need to be addressed in films, but when they're done at the expense of the fun and the gore that makes Evil Dead so much fun, it really does start to pick apart the very essence of what these Evil Dead films are about. There's a story to be told here, but when you really unravel what Evil Dead does best, it does neither the gore hounds or seek this out, although seeking something deeper out, any favours. So this falls in the middle between wanting to be an elevated horror film and not achieving that, and wanting to be an Evil Dead film and not achieving that either. So I'm sorry, this one's a misfire.
Yeah, to me, the Evil Dead films kind of ended with the Sam Raimi run of original 3 films. I've never been that interested in the franchise since.
Yeah, look, the Fede Alvarez absolutely stuck to the guns that Raimi introduced with his reboot. But yeah, no, these are very much of the Raimi, Raimi oeuvre, and established him as the unique filmmaker that he is. But yeah, this one will be jettisoned by many Evil Dead followers as a backward step.
Yeah, so look, we've had 2 things now where you talked about a movie which you weren't entirely sold on, and Little House on the Prairie, which is fine, but maybe not necessarily entirely sort of aimed at me. But I want to speak positively about something, Simon.
Nice,
so,
let's hear this.
Yeah, so let's play a little clip of a new anime series which is debuted this week on Netflix, and this is a show that's rolling out weekly. It's a little program called... sorry, I just about forgot the name. Sorry, I'm just doing an edit here.
Going so well then.
I want to call it Sparks of Tomorrow, but I reckon I can't. I've lost it. Sparks of Tomorrow. Edit point. Little program called Sparks of Tomorrow.
すごいね、正六兄ちゃん。いろんな機械がいっぱいだ。
蒸気の発明ばっかりだけどな。つけるぞ。おお。
88俺たちで電気の時代を作るぞ
清六兄ちゃん
あれから4年電気の時代は来ていない騙しやがった
今日は何か作る。
修理仕事も少ないしな極楽でも作るか
Now, Simon, I really deliberately wanted to play a clip here because this show is absolutely gorgeous.
Mm.
I don't think you're an anime person at all, but I think it's probably really important that you press play on this one and just give this a bit of a look. This is a program which is set in. Look, I'm going to take a bit of a side detour here. A show which I love dearly, but it's not maybe the coolest thing that I could be maybe sort of talking about is the show called The Gilded Age.
Oh my God.
At the end of the first season of that program, which is set around like 1880s New York, you see them celebrating like an event where electricity is being displayed to everybody. So like they're out in this sort of courtyard type thing, and you see like light bulbs sort of being lit up, and everyone's just like marveling at like this electricity around.
That's like Hobart in 1987.
Yeah, exactly the same experience. And I was thinking about that moment in Sparks of Tomorrow because the opening of this one, it's very much about a alternate reality Japan where electricity never really took off and instead the steam age just continued on. So it's sort of steampunky a little bit, and that's kind of where the technological energy is of the time. Energy, I mean that more in a cultural way rather than necessarily like electricity kind of a way, but people are interested in steam power. So the opening scene of this one takes place in a very similar sort of courtyard moment where people are being exposed to like the beauty of seeing lights lit up really for the first time in their life. Okay, but the technology is not quite there to sustain it in the same way that we see in the Gilded Age and, in real life. Instead, the technology that we're seeing here is really, really flimsy and doesn't really quite take off. So at the core of this one, you got this young boy whose older brother has this thing called the 20th century. Oh gosh, I wrote it down here somewhere because it's a weird name. The 20th century electrical catalog, which is basically just a book that explains how to, create electricity and stuff. And like this is like the Bible to be able to make this technology work. Okay, like all the understanding as to how to make electricity work is found within this book. His older brother, however, goes missing. And so this boy sort of grows up sort of really passionate about sort of keeping the spirit of electricity alive, but also doesn't know how to do it because his brother's gone and this book, which kind of explains it all, gone with him. So we pick the story up like a couple of years later where the boy's, like a young man. There's this girl that kind of becomes a little bit interested in him and their destinies kind of lock. He rejects her entirely, and then she mentions this boy to her older sister while there's some business going down with her family, and the sister's like, take this book to this guy because she recognizes his name. And this girl that he's just met, her sister has the 20th century electrical catalog. And so this then propels the series forward.
Here comes the momentum that I'm waiting for. This is interesting. And you say I'm not an anime fan, and I'm not specifically an anime fan, but I do love great animation, so I would absolutely tune into this.
And this is the thing. The animation in this is absolutely gorgeous. It's a mixture of very traditional sort of anime look, but then also I think anime over the last, we'll say, 10 years or so has really gone through this massive sort of evolutionary step where with digital technology taking place, like they're really sort of playing around with what's possible. And while watching this, I've really felt a mix of animation styles coming in the same way we've seen through like the Spider-Man, Spider-Verse movies. The last couple of years.
What was the Netflix thing, the Sex and Love Dream Sex and Robots, whatever that was called, with like the anthology?
That's it. And so a lot of the studios that were contributing to that anthology were traditional anime studios as well as some small indies around the place. And watching this program, and then a couple of times I delve into anime around the place, it just reminds me of how traditional and staid I just find a lot of American animation to be. Like this is so lively and so vibrant. And the one thing that I'll really push for this one, saying that, this is definitely the one to watch, is there's, I guess, maybe a high-pitched sort of squeal that kind of exists with a lot of anime with characters when they start getting excited.
Yes,
and I just find that incredibly off-putting. But I found that was really, really almost not even a thing within this program. Like it is just tonally exactly kind of what I'm looking for from what I want to watch when I'm watching an anime. And
would that suggest that it's been has it been tempered in any way to suit
I don't
Western
think so.
taste?
I think this is just that meets the the content on screen.
Cool. All right.
The show, it's going out weekly. There's only one episode available now, so I don't really have a lot of sort of substance to talk about with this one. But Simon, I can check this one out. It's like 25 minutes. I think you'll probably enjoy this one too.
All right, let's do that. I'm going to jump in here quickly and mention just a very small film that's playing at the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival this weekend, and I think there's a couple of screenings coming up. It's called Eyes Like Diamond. The name comes from a witnesses to the Tasmanian tiger who sees their eyes shine at night. And can say that it sparkles like diamonds. For those of you who don't know the legend of the Tasmanian tiger, it's not a cryptid. It was a real creature. There's footage of the creature living in pens and living in zoos. The last one is reported to have passed away in the mid-30s in a Tasmanian zoo. This is the story of a man, Neil Warner. Oh, God, I should have written the name down. I'm pretty sure that's his name. Who has devoted his life to proving that the Tasmanian tiger actually exists, collecting scat, collecting footprints. All the while he's doing this, he's dealing with his own tragedies. And this documentary is as much about the search to prove that the Tasmanian tiger, or the thylacine as it's called, actually exists, but also to do with this man surviving in his own head and dealing with the tragedy in his life. It's a really beautiful film, really beautifully made. The prehistoric woodlands of Tasmania are beautifully captured, as are the personalities and the emotional journeys that this man goes on through the course of this documentary. It's going to get a small cinema release. If you're one of our Melbourne listeners, do try and get out and see it at the Documentary Film Festival. It will also be available across quite a few platforms in the months ahead. Mark it in your diary. It's called Eyes Like Diamonds.
The last thing we're going to talk about here is a new show that's debuted on Binge in Australia, but it's a Peacock original from the US. It's called The 5-Star Weekend. The premise of this one is you got Jennifer Garner. She's a social media identity who's based around cooking. She's an influencer.
And I'm out.
Yeah. So we see her in the kitchen. She's baking her, delicious sort of cookie goods. She gets this sort of knock on the door. It's the police. They've told her that her husband's died. And so 6 months later, we're seeing a sort of breakdown on TV while she's trying to release her new book on her TV segment. Anyway, she realizes she needs to do something in her life to try to break out of the funk that she's been in for the last 6 months following the death of the husband. And so she hears about this idea of going on a holiday weekend and bringing along 5 friends. This is a very sort of online social media kind of a plot. It's suggested that you bring 5 friends along from different stages of your life. Okay, so yeah,
What?
exactly. So in this one, she brings along a childhood friend who's played by Chloe Savini. She brings along a college friend played by Regina Hall. She's got a mum friend played by Darcy Carden, and she's got her internet influencer cultural friend played by an actress named Jenna Chan.
Okay.
So you've got all these characters all brought together in this household. And so we watched them over the course of the first season. And look, I'll admit, I was actually kind of interested in this one because, you look at that cast and it's a pretty interesting cast. And it's got a premise where they really get some sort of interesting sort of emotional truths. But when I was watching it, it just kind of fell into the thing I was a bit concerned it might do, which is that I just never really quite believe that these 5 people are, they're not supposed to be friends with each other. They're really, friends in law, like they've got her in common, but they've all kind of met through various sort of stages previously. I just didn't really quite buy any of those relationships, and it never really quite felt authentic. And then a lot of the dialogue just kind of felt just a little bit forced, and it's kind of like forced fun.
I can absolutely see why it's a premise, because it would bring together these 5 very diverse elements of modern society to speak through the issues that impact them. But to make those real people and not just archetypes, then that's the challenge, and it doesn't sound like it's stepped up.
They sort of verge on being real, but it just didn't really feel authentic, and that's kind of what was missing from this one. I really wanted to buy in and actually connect with these characters, and at just no point that I do that. There's just all these sort of cute moments through the first episode where they're playing games, but it just felt so forced and awkward. And I appreciate that in the reality of the show, this was a forced and awkward weekend that all these people are being brought together on. They all want to support their friend, but like they all know we've got no business really being in the sort of room together. But like that to me has like a tension to it, which should exist as well. And it just wasn't quite there. But there's one thing that I really wanted to push on this one, which is there is a actress in this one where she came on screen in this first episode. And I was like, wait, she's kind of interesting. Like, you know, she's not like, you know, a knockout by any means. So it wasn't like a hubba, who is this? It wasn't one of these sorts of
sound
things.
Like me. What's going on with you?
I wanted to break away from the Simon Foster of this. But she just had like this sort of vibe about her. And I was like, she's kind of interesting. I want to sort of see more of this lady. I looked up who she was. It's Wes Duchovny, which is the daughter of David Duchovny and Tia Leone.
Well, that's interesting.
I know that she's like started acting and I think she's 27 years old at the moment. She's only been acting for like a year or two. Like she was apparently like studying to like some sort of science degree and had no interest in acting and then suddenly found herself doing it. And she's like, actually, you know what? This is actually pretty good. And so she's, you know, picked up a few projects, but she's got a real screen presence. You know, it's no surprise considering that both of her parents, I think, are highly charismatic screen identities, and she's got it as well.
And she also has a compass direction as a name. We've got West Duchovny, we've got North Kardashian from the cut. I don't know if we had an East or
I'm not too sure.
Okay.
But you know what? I was just thinking about it. David Duchovny, a very non-traditional kind of a TV charisma. Tia Leone, a very non-traditional TV charisma.
Sure.
And Wes Duchovny, I kind of feel is exactly the same. It's a very non-traditional TV charisma.
Genes.
I really want to see a lot more from her. I think she's like, you know, maybe it'll like, you know, pan out. It's like, okay, whatever. But right now, you know, I've got her on my card. I want to see what's going on there.
Where do you think she gets the looks from? Is she more Duchovny or more Leone?
I think that someone's done one of these sort of computer composites and just smashed them together because
that's
she doesn't quite look like either of them, but she looks absolutely like both of them.
Well said. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of another podcast.
Look, I'll say this. She doesn't look like Denise from Twin Peaks.
Good. That's good to know. And if you know, you know. We also should shout out very quickly that one of yours and mine's favourite films of the year, Gail Daughtry and the Celebrity Sex Pass, is in US cinemas. If you're one of our US listeners, please get along and support this film in its opening weekend. It's getting a fairly wide release, not too wide, but fairly wide. And we adored this film. So it's very funny. You'll have a great time watching it.
Excellent. Simon Foster, we're recording this on Saturday morning. I'm off to swim class. We'll see you next week.
All right, buddy. Take care. We're not going to do the plugs. We really should mention very quickly Screen Watching at Screen Watching Podcast on Facebook, at Screen Watching on YouTube. My Screen Space newsletter is about to go out. As we say this, you do always be watching and always be streaming. Go and do your swim class.
Guys, we'll see you later on.